Well, good morning, everybody. This is Barry Jones with SP History, and we are about to begin episode 2 in the Oak Cliff series, and that is the series I have entitled the Rosetta Stone. And as I mentioned yesterday, I think understanding two fundamental facts, and it has taken me years to come to this realization myself. I've been studying this for 30 years. I was thinking about it this morning on my way over to the library here, and I can't think of anything in my lifetime that I've thought more about, with the exception of one thing. I remember a couple years early in my basketball coaching career, I had a team that couldn't score. That's not a good way to play a game of basketball. You got to be able to put points on the board. And I racked my brain for an offense that players who couldn't shoot, players who couldn't dribble, pass, or shoot could score. I probably thought more about that and than this. Maybe, I don't know. It's close. I have thought and thought and thought about this. And I purposely did that because I wanted to get outside the box. We get in this echo chamber with JFK researchers and we bounce ideas off each other. And without even realizing it, we just sort of absorb what other people think. And or we take as a matter of gospel faith that the Warren Commission at least had some standard of evidentiary procedure that could be relied upon. It was credible. Or the House Select. I have uh, disavowed all of that, and this is the result. This work is the result of me doing my own thinking. Just, and I could be completely wrong. You could completely disagree with me, and that's fine. But I I have lost all faith in the Warren Commission or the Warren Report, anything produced by the FBI or the CIA. I have no confidence in, and that includes all the documents. I don't believe any of them. I've lost all confidence in not all, but a lot of confidence in some of my fellow research community where I realize they're just like me. So I decided if it's going to be me doing the talking and presenting my material, I might as well do the thinking. So I've been thinking about this a long time and trying to empty my head of all my presuppositional viewpoints and think through what I know to be true and use those puzzle pieces along with my own common sense reasoning, deductive reasoning skills, and come up with what I think happened. And we'll get to that. But right now we're going through the facts of the case. And I think if you understand two fundamental facts about what we're discussing, what happened at Oak Cliff, first, that there were two Oswalds. There were always two. That's a huge jump start. It took me years to understand that. And so many things didn't make sense until that puzzle piece fell into place. And the second thing is to understand that Oak Cliff was where mistakes were made. If you want to find out what happened in the JFK assassination, who was behind it, who was involved, how did the conspiracy uh, unwind a little bit? Go to the Oak Cliff, the shooting of Tippit, and what happened at the theater, what the witnesses said, the evidence said, and you'll see, if you just are an honest broker, and if you just look at it honestly, you'll see uh, some huge puzzle pieces come into play. So that's what we're looking at. And I had neglected yesterday, I got in a hurry and I neglected to go back and review the questions that I said I wanted to answer yesterday. I think I answered them, but I always try to introduce the questions and then answer them at the end. So I'm going to do that now. And before we start, and of course, the questions that we looked at yesterday are highlighted in yellow. With respect to J.D. Tippit, the question was, why was he in Oak Cliff 10 minutes after the assassination? And the answer to that was he was waiting for Lee Harvey Oswald. He was waiting for that Marsalis bus. Remember the gas station? Second question, why was he waiting at the gas station for the Marsalis bus? And that's because it's not the Marsalis bus necessarily. It's who's on that Marsalis bus. And of course, Oswald was supposed to be on that bus. He has a task, and we haven't covered that yet, but he has a task which requires his being there and meeting that bus and meeting Oswald. Third question, why did he make a call at Top 10 Records? Well, when he watched the bus go whizzing by and Oswald didn't get off at any of the stops before Jefferson Avenue, he realized, I'm not going to be able to complete my task. And he panicked. And his movements betray what he was going to do next because he goes right to Top 10, which is right near the Texas Theater. And he's sort of staking it out like he was at the gas station. And then he runs in, makes a phone call, like he's trying to contact somebody, tell them something urgent. He's moving quickly at this point. And then he comes out of the theater. He gets back in his car and he zooms off in the direction of 10th Street. Before he gets there, he stops James Andrews, frantically searches his car, and acting crazy and wild, not making much sense. So the question is, why did he stop? He's looking for somebody. Just like he was waiting for somebody at the bus stop, and then he followed the bus looking for that person to get off the bus. Then he went to the Top 10 record store and staked out the Texas Theater, hoping to catch a glimpse of the person that he was waiting for. When all of the above failed, then he goes in and makes that hurried phone call. Now he's just grab bagging, and you can see the plan has fallen apart. The carefully laid plan. Now he's just driving around randomly in Oak Cliff looking for this person. And then eventually he makes the decision to drive to 10th Street. And he isn't the only one that's going to make the decision to drive to 10th Street or to arrive at 10th Street at a particular time. So the question is why? And I believe it was because who was there. Westbrook and Croy were going to be there. He knew Westbrook and Croy were going to be there, and Westbrook was in charge of this operation. And so since what he was supposed to do has failed, and since he doesn't know what to do, he's going to inquire of the guy who's in charge of this operation. What do I do? Not realizing that Westbrook and Croy already took care of his job for him. He doesn't know that yet. But he's going to meet with Westbrook and Croy and find out, or Westbrook in particular, and find out what to do next. That's not the reason everybody's going to 10th Street, but that's the reason Tippit is headed that direction. Two questions we're going to look at today. About Tippit. Why did he end up stopping his car? We kind of answered that yesterday. He stopped his car because the doppelganger was walking towards him. And so he pulled over to the side, and the doppelganger leaned over and through the passenger window was talking to him. So he obviously knew who the doppelganger was and recognized him and had a conversation with him. So he stopped to have that conversation. Another question we're going to answer today is, why did Dallas Police change the time Tippit was shot? You'll see how they changed that. These yellow questions about Westbrook and Croy. Why were they searching the Marsalis bus in Dallas? They were looking for, just like Tippit was waiting for Oswald to come across the bridge on the bus, make his stop and get off. Westbrook and Croy were looking for him on that bus. And I believe, I can't prove this. Some people have speculated they were going to make an arrest there, or there's going to be a shootout there. And I will expand on that in just a minute. But I don't believe that'd be the case, because if that had been the case, would they have not arrested him at the rooming house when they picked him up there? If the goal was to arrest him, they're going to pick him up and take him from the rooming house to the Texas Theater a few minutes later. Why not arrest him there? Uh, no, I think they were there to pick him up and ensure that he ended up in the destination where he was supposed to end up, which was the Texas Theater. And the bus was caught in traffic. And so I think that was them saying, okay, we got to get him to the destination. And of course, Lee Harvey Oswald was thinking the same thing, which is why he got off the bus. I've got to get to that destination. There was some urgency there. Second question, why did they commandeer car 207 instead of using Westbrook's own unmarked car? I think we'll see that more, explain more today, but it's clear that Westbrook makes that determination. His car was available, sitting right there. In fact, he's going to go back later and get it. But to do what he's going to do next, he doesn't want his car, that number which is tied to his badge, to be witnessed by anybody. And so they're going to use a car that belongs to somebody else that isn't assigned to the Oak Cliff district. And so there will be some plausible deniability that they'll be able to question the witness and maybe badger the witness into changing their number because that car was on record and being at the Texas School Book Depository parking lot, and it belonged to an officer that did not ever get assigned to Oak Cliff. So there's a reason. Third, why did they signal Oswald at his rooming house? I believe the rooming house is there's a common intelligence tactic, which is if the wires get crossed, there's always a backup meet spot where you can go. And if for some reason some part of the plan didn't work out according to the plan, they know where the backup meetup spot is. And I believe that's what the rooming house was. They knew he was there. That's why they honked the horn. But they hadn't seen him enter. They hadn't he wasn't sitting out on the stoop. He was inside in his room. But they honked the horn, which alerted the attention of Earlene Roberts, who looked out, saw the car. And then they just pulled around to the bus stop and waited for him, like they'd done it many times before. Fourth question, when and why did Captain Westbrook and Sergeant Croy get Oswald's dark colored jacket? That was on the trip over from the rooming house to the theater. And we know that because of what happens today. So we'll talk more about that today. But we also know because when Oswald entered the theater, he didn't have the dark color. And the only place he was between the rooming house and the theater was Westbrook and Croy's car. Fifth question, why did Westbrook and Croy drive to an alley and hide behind houses and bushes on 10th Street is the destination. And there's something going to go down along 10th Street that they want. Part of the plan is for them to see this doppelganger go by. And then they're going to follow him as he lays a trail of evidence to the theater. He's coming from the west, so he's coming east from Marsalis direction, east along 10th Street, and he's going to pass right in front of them. And of course, they know that. It's all prearranged. The tippit showing up when he did, where he did, was, I don't believe, part of the plan. I can't prove it, but I think what happens next sort of illustrates my point. But Tippit was there because of his mix-up, and he's panicked because he hasn't been able to complete his assignment. So he's going to where his boss is to find out what to do next. Anyway, but you notice that they were very careful to hide themselves back, recessed off the street, the curb, behind the level of the houses and the bushes and the trees, so as not to alert the attention of eyewitnesses in the neighborhood, but also to hide themselves from the doppelganger and make it look believable that they had happened upon this suspicious character that they're going to follow. All right. Playing hide and seek a little bit. Couple questions that we're going to look at today regarding Westbrook and Croy. Why did Westbrook leave the Tippit scene to drive to Abundant Life Church? Why did Westbrook leave Oak Cliff to drive back to the Texas School Book Depository? He's going to do that in the minutes after. Why did Croy stay behind at the Tippit scene? How and why did Croy attempt to disguise himself in the first minutes after Tippit was shot? And why did Westbrook initially avoid the Tippit scene after he returned from the depository building? A few more questions about Westbrook and Croy we're going to look at today. What was the origin of the Oswald jacket that Westbrook, quote, found behind the Texaco station? What was the purpose of the wallet Westbrook produced at the Tippit scene? And how did 26 Dallas police officers that were at the Tippit scene end up at the Texas Theater 1 minute after the dispatch alert came over the radio? I mean, it was like heaven and earth descended on the Texas Theater. A couple questions we're going to look at about Lee Harvey Oswald today. Where was his dark jacket when he entered the Texas Theater that Earlene Roberts said he was wearing when he left the rooming house? Kind of already answered that, but we're going to see it fleshed out a little bit today. It's with Westbrook and Croy. That's where it's at. How did he pay for a movie ticket and popcorn without his wallet? And then why did he move from seat to seat inside the theater? Some questions about the doppelganger yesterday that we answered. Question one, if his destination was Oak Cliff in the Texas Theater, why did he excuse me, why did he begin his November 22 hijinks at the Texas School Depository? Because he's trying to set up Oswald, and that's where Oswald was. That's his workplace. So when it comes time to trace the movements of the suspect, depending on who the suspect is, let's just right now stipulate it's Oswald, right? Because that's what everybody thinks. It's not what I think, but that's what everybody thinks. You got to start where he works, his place of employment. And so the Oswald doppelganger is going to start his day or his movements from 12:30 on after the shooting from the same location. Where was the Oswald doppelganger during the shooting? Interesting, in the building itself, we know Oswald was in the second floor break room. And that's really not the purpose of this presentation to get into all that. I've covered that before, but that's where he was. So where was the doppelganger? Of course, they can't be together because you can't have them together. That's going to be the problem when we get to the theater because they're going to end up together. That's a problem. But he was in the building, and interestingly, he was on the sixth floor, the workstation of Lee Harvey Oswald. You can probably guess the reason. Third question, how did he get to Oak Cliff? We learned about the Nash Rambler yesterday. What route did he take to get to Oak Cliff and then eventually to the Texas Theater? Well, he went along the same route that the Marsalis bus was going to take or did take. And so that betrays he's literally following in the footsteps of Lee Harvey Oswald, or what he thinks are the footsteps of Lee Harvey. What the plan was, Oswald's supposed to be on that Marsalis bus. He's going to get off on one of those bus stops, and that's where he's going to begin his journey to the theater. His is by car. The doppelganger is going to follow along behind, get dropped off along Marsalis, and begin his journey on foot along 10th Street, which is west or east in the direction of the Texas Theater, which is he's just going to do it all by foot because he's got to catch a lot of people's attention. He's got to be viewed by witnesses. The real Oswald doesn't. Last question, how did his route intersect with Oswald's planned route? Well, he starts at the same place Oswald starts. He goes to the same side of town that Oswald was supposed to go, Marsalis, and he's headed towards the same place where Oswald already is, the theater. A question we're going to look at today is how did he attract the right kind of attention? We left off yesterday. He's already caught the attention of quite a few witnesses along 10th Street, but it'll get even more obvious as we go along. The 10th and Patton location, how did question we looked at yesterday, why was the doppelganger in position to be at and subsequently escape from the 10th and Patton location? Because that was the planned route. And when everything goes down at 10th and Patton, it just so happens to be where Westbrook and Croy are in an alley facing 10th Street, where the doppelganger is walking east along 10th Street, and where Tippit and his passenger in his car arrive because they know where Westbrook and Croy are going to be to ask Westbrook what to do next. So all 5 people end up at the same place at the same time. So all 3 of them were supposed to, according to the plan. Tippit and his passenger were supposed to be doing other things. Another question we answered yesterday, what is the significance of 10th Street? It is the street that was picked for the path of the doppelganger because it coincided with Oswald being dropped off at Marsalis and his route to the theater. It was the east-west street from the Marsalis side of town to the Texas Theater. And so all the action's going to happen on 10th Street. There's another significance of 10th Street that pertains to Tippit. We'll get into a little bit later. But I don't think it's related. I think it's just coincidental. Anyway, some questions we're going to look at. Did I get to? Oh, I forgot to talk about the questions we're going to answer today. How did Oswald get from his rooming house to 10th and Patton in 3 minutes? Remember, he was last viewed at 1:03 at the bus stop. And the shooting of Tippit's going to happen at 1:06. How in the world is that possible? On foot. That's the key. Second question, why did Tippit and his passenger drive to the 10th and Patton location, joining Westbrook and Croy? I've kind of already answered that. Third question, why did Dallas police claim the shooter left his wallet on the ground at the Tippit scene? This is a huge clue as to whom they were supposed to arrest. Huge clue. And fourth, how did Oswald get from 10th and Patton to the Texas Theater? Another 1 mile jaunt, again on foot. And this time, in even less time, 1 minute. All right, regarding the Texas Theater, if Oswald was the man Butch Burroughs witnessed entering the Texas Theater between 1 and 1:07 p.m., buying a ticket from Julia Postal at 1:07, who was the Oswald witness who said shot Officer Tippit at 1:06? So we have an eyewitness at the theater said, no, I watched my girl sell him a ticket. And in fact, he brought it to me and I tore it in half and he went into the theater. If Oswald was the man Butch Burroughs, the same witness, later sold popcorn to at 1:15, who was the Oswald DPD said shot Officer Tippit at 1:15? You know, again, remember now, if you think there's only one Oswald, then that doesn't make sense. But if there's 2, you can have 2 people in 2 different places at the same time. It's possible. A pretty neat intelligence trick. If Oswald entered the theater between 1 and 1:07, according to Burroughs and various moviegoers, who was the Oswald that entered at 1:35? The nearly identical Oswald. And this is according to witnesses Tommy Rowe, Johnny Brewer, and Julia Postal. Who was that Oswald? And last question we'll look at today. Why did Julia Postal burst into tears twice when later confronted by an investigator with evidence that the man she reported as having sneaked into the Texas Theater without buying a ticket at 1:35 was not the same man arrested by Dallas police and taken out the front of the theater? She felt guilty. She had just pointed the finger at somebody and she knew she'd sold it. Well, I don't want to answer it yet. We'll get to it. Some questions about the evidence. Why did witnesses not see spent .38 shells and or the wallet on the ground near Tippit's body? You know, they were all out there around the body for several minutes before the police and the ambulance showed up. Second question, why did the 38 shells in the Warren Commission exhibit not have Dallas police officer J.M. Poe's initials on them? He claimed he found them and he put his initials on them. Why didn't the exhibit show them the initials? Why did Benavides reported hearing 5 shots? Why were there only 4 shell casings? Why did the distribution of Winchester and Remington bullets taken from Tippit's body not match the distribution of spent shell casings from the 38 revolver taken off Oswald at the theater? Or the ones on the ground, for that matter, that they claimed were on the ground? Why did witnesses say 2 men fled the Tippit scene? Why did DPD officer Westbrook leave the scene of a crime? Why did Dallas police change the time of Tippett's shooting from 106 to 115? And why did Dallas police plant a wallet at the Tippett scene and then have to make it disappear later? Some random questions we're going to look at today. There was a United States Army photographer named Stuart Reed, and he's the guy who took the pictures of that bus that I showed you yesterday. But he didn't just take pictures of that bus. He took pictures of the 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Depository building. And then an hour later, he was out front of the Texas Theater taking pictures of Oswald being arrested out the front. 3 pretty famous photographs. And he's the guy on all 3 occasions that's there with the most opportune shot of a lifetime. What's with that? You can kind of understand the 6th floor window in the Texas Theater because the story is that the shots came from the 6th floor, and then of course they're going to eventually arrest somebody at Texas Theater. But what about the bus? That seems awful random. Was he trying to get pictures of Lee Harvey Oswald, or because the doppelganger he left in a Nash Rambler? So why the bus? We'll seek to answer that today. Second question, why did Dallas police officers quickly relieve Oswald of his jacket? And why did officers take the Oswald doppelganger's light-colored jacket, his wallet, his 38, off of him? You'll see where that happens. And then fourthly, how and why did the first mix-up lead to the second? These mix-ups are the mistakes I'm talking about. And lastly, how would the acknowledgement of a second Oswald before, during, and after the assassination have changed the investigation and the entire case? Just that one fact, the American people had learned that, and how it would change everything. Okay, so here we are. This is where we left off yesterday. We're at 10th and Patton, and Tippett's talking through the window of his car, passenger window. And at some point at 106, according to witnesses in the neighborhood, he got out of his patrol car. Remember, Jimmy Burt is watching this entire episode. The taxi driver, Scoggins, is watching it. William Smith is watching it. So there's witnesses watching all this happen. And of course, Benavides is going to be there as well. He's actually the closest witness, parked right in front of it. So Tippit gets out of his patrol car and he starts walking around the front of his car. And the young man raises up and pulls at 38 and fires 3 shots at Tippit. Tippit falls to the ground. The young man turns like he's going to leave the scene. Remember now, in the alley, staring right at this whole scene is Westbrook and Croy. But the young man doesn't see him. Tippit, whether Tippit knew they were there, I don't know. It seems like he did because he parked right in front of them. Or he parked right in front of that alley, knowing that that's where they would end up. I don't know. I can't answer that question definitively. But I know that the doppelganger begins hightailing out of there. He's going to leave the scene. And then he stops. Some of the witnesses say that he stopped at the same time Westbrook got out of the driver's side of his car. And they didn't personally witness it themselves. It was almost like he stopped because somebody yelled at him to tell him something. And he stops in mid as he's walking along. And he goes back. He returns to the scene, goes back to where Tippit is laying on the ground, and deliberately shoots him one more time in the head, like the coup de grace shot. And then he leaves the scene. Now, I put down here in red print that the Tippit scene was 1 mile away from Oswald's rooming house. And remember now, the last time anybody saw Oswald, witnesses, 103, you're staying at the bus stop. And of course, we know that he was picked up by Westbrook and Croy and taken to the back alley of the Texas Theater at that time. But what the Warren Commission is going to try to tell us later is that he walked or ran, whatever, the 1 mile. And they know you can't do it in 3 minutes, so they're going to jimmy rig the time. All right, that's why I'm bringing this up. There's no way humanly possible you can get on foot 1 mile in 3 minutes. So just keep that, file that away in your mind. The Warren Commission realizes that. That's why they're going to monkey with the evidence with the time. And it's really not even going to be the Warren Commission. The monkeying with the time is going to happen way before. Dallas police, FBI, they're going to realize it too. So anyway, a couple of notes about Tippit. He lived with his wife and his family 7 miles south of 10th and Patton, and he was assigned to an area as a Dallas police officer. His area was Area 78, which was South Oak Cliff. But this was District 91 in Central Oak Cliff. In other words, he's not even supposed to be in this district. He's not assigned to this district. Now, when asked about it later, Dallas police produced a dispatch that a recording of an order to him and his partner to go to this part of Oak Cliff. But what's been left unresolved is the fact that his partner never left the Texas School Book Depository building. According to Dallas police, the order went out for Tippit and his partner to go to Oak Cliff. If that's true, why did the partner never leave the Texas School Book Depository building? And so it again raises the question, why was he even there? Unless he was part of a prearranged plot and his partner wasn't, which is why they were separated. Anyway, there is on its face, there's no reason for him to be there. It's not his assigned district. It's not near his house. His partner's back at the depository building. There's no obvious reason why he's even there or supposed to be there. But witnesses in that neighborhood knew him very well because he'd been there so many times prior, which begs the question, why was he always there? That was not his home. That was not his assigned district. But they knew him. Jimmy Burt, we've talked about him before, a witness said, Tippit, I knew Tippit, quote, as an officer who frequented the neighborhood. This particular officer was known by the name, quote, friendly to the residents of that area. The taxi driver, Scoggins, said, I wasn't paying too much attention to the man. You see, I just used to see him every day. Aquila Clemens, another witness who lived at the home of Mr. and Mr. Smathers on 10th, told Mark Lane that she saw Tippit there all the time. The 5 witnesses we've already discussed at the Glauco gas station all said they knew Tippit personally. And that's, again, in this part of town, it's not his regular assignment. In fact, it was miles away from it. So why was he so well known in this area if this was not his home or his assigned area? So Virginia Davis, who lived on the corner, literally on the corner of 10th and Patton. If you look at that top map, I have 4 houses there. Look at the 400 house. That's the one right on the corner. That's Virginia Davis's house. the crime scene is next door. So this is somebody who lives in that neighborhood, and she would know. She and her sister both lived in that house. Anyway, when David Beelan, Warren Commission attorney, asked her where was the police car parked, and this was about they're trying to ascertain the whereabouts of Tippit's vehicle, not necessarily why he's always there. Davis answered him, quote, "It was parked between the hedge that marks the apartment house where he, talking about Tippit, lives, and 410 10th Street. That's the house I have circled there. And the house next door, which is 404. In other words, she's saying Tippit lives in that house. Huh? I thought Tippit lived 7 miles away with his family. Well, when you look into that house, you find out it's a duplex, it's an apartment. There's an apartment in the front, there's an apartment in the back. And it turns out Tippit was having an affair with the woman who lived in the other apartment. They shared that duplex. He lived in either the front or the back, and she lived in the other one. And that's why he was always in that area. He lived there with his girlfriend, and then he maintained a second residence on the other side of town with his wife and kids. So the guy's got a double life. That's what he's got. And isn't it ironic that that's where he ends up killed, right in front of the house that he was sharing with his girlfriend? That's why I think he parked there on purpose, because I think it was arranged in advance when Westbrook and Croy, when Westbrook was informing Tippit at some point where he was going to be along 10th Street, he said, "I'm going to be in the alley between next to your house." So Tippit goes right to it because he knows, I mean, he lives there. So anyway, just a little some more details about Tippit there. So here's another witness, Domingo Benavides, who's driving his yellow. As you can see, this is a reenactment there, but they parked a 1958 yellow Chevy pickup truck. He's going west on 10th Street, approaching Tippit's squad car. So the doppelganger's coming at him, because remember, the doppelganger's going east. So he's going west. And he approaches Tippit's squad car. And it's a narrow street. I've been on the street, and I've got a truck. It's bigger than that truck. And if someone parks on the side, you have to go way over. And if somebody's parked on the other side, you can park on both sides. You literally have to squeeze down the middle of and if traffic comes at you, somebody has to stop and pull over. It's a very narrow street. Anyway, so he slows on the narrow street because Tippit's parked in front of him. And he's watching Tippit as he's waiting for Tippit to get out of his way. Tippit gets out of the car, begins walking around the front, and he sees the whole scene. The guy stands up on the passenger side, and from 15 feet away, this is the closest witness, Benavides witnesses the young man shoot Tippit 3 times. And so he slams on his brakes, comes to a complete stop. He's kind of been rolling, and he hears 2 more shots. Now he put his head down, so he didn't see the final 2 shots. He saw the first 3, but he heard 5 total shots, which is indicative of a second shooter. Remember now, there is a passenger in Tippit's car. He's picked up a passenger. We'll get to him later, but because there's 5 shots and only 4 shell casings, and the gun that will be later produced as the murder weapon at Tippit's scene will only have 4 shell casings missing. And according to a witness, the young man, the doppelganger, manually ejected the 4 shell casings onto the ground as he fled the scene. And so 5 shots, but 4 shell casings indicate somebody else took the 5th shot and did not, 38s don't automatically eject their shell casings. You have to manually do it. So whoever shot the fifth shot did not manually eject it. Or if he did, they never found it. But Benavides heard 5 shots. And when you look at the distribution of bullets that they took out of Tippit's body and compare it to the distribution of the shell casings on the ground that they later produced, they didn't match. The distribution of Remington's and Winchester's in his body were 2-2, 2 Remingtons, 2 Winchesters. The distribution of the shell casings on the ground were 3-1, indicating somebody else took a shot, and the shell casings don't match. At least the ones that they produced from the ground don't match what was in the chamber of the gun, or I'm sorry, in the body of Tippit. So you have shell casings on the ground that don't match the bullets in the body. If it was one gun. Now, if it's 2 guns, you can see how it would work. But if it's just 1 gun, it doesn't work. So, and of course, a lot of witnesses are going to say they saw 2 shooters run off in opposite directions. So that's a problem. My guess is, well, I don't want to speculate. Let's just talk about what it is. That's the evidence that is. I'll speculate later, but so Benavides then watched the shooters leave the scene, and the one he focused on was the one he saw shoot, which was the first 3 shots by the young man, or the doppelganger. And he says as he turned and he ran away from him in the direction of the theater, he noticed that the young man had a blocked hairline in the back. It wasn't tapered. And it stopped above the shirt collar, so you could see exposed neck there. Benavides, as it turns out, was a part-time barber, which is why you notice things like that, right? You and I probably don't notice that. He does. And he said that he looked like he needed a haircut for about 2 weeks. Now, when Oswald was arrested, his hair was very short, and it was tapered in the back, and the hairline went down below the shirt collar. So this is somebody who would have experience in barbering, if that's even a word, would notice. And that is a blocked hairline versus a tapered hairline. That's their line of work. That's what they do. And he said this guy had a blocked hairline, and of course we know Oswald didn't. So that's another important detail. So at this point, the doppelganger begins circuitously making his route to the Texas theater. Remember now, his job is to be very obvious and to act very suspicious and to attract as much attention as possible. He's the bait. So you see here in red his route. The red circle indicates the Tippit scene, and then the arrows in the red show the direction that he's going. And this is witnessed on 10th Street by all the witnesses, Jimmy Burt included, but there were others. And then when he detours over to Jefferson and then back across to in the direction of 10th Street again towards the church, other people start noticing him. 2 in particular, Warren Reynolds sees him and follows him. And Jimmy Burt continues to follow him. So you've got this doppelganger who is picking up witnesses as he goes. Another one was Ted Calloway. Ted Calloway worked at Deutsch Motors. Got a picture of his company here. It's a little auto dealership. And there's a picture of him standing in front of Deutsch Motors. And it's right on Jefferson Boulevard, right at the corner of Patton and Jefferson. So if you go back and you look at the route that the doppelganger took, as he's He turns on the corner of Patton there, and he comes right up Patton to the corner of Jefferson. So it's going to be right there in front, Ted Calloway. And it was right across the alley from where Virginia and Barbara Davis lived. So he's in a prime position. Of course, these auto dealers, they're outside all the time, dealing with customers and et cetera, et cetera. Calloway was close enough. He heard the shots. So he goes outside and he sees the doppelganger, a man he later identifies as Lee Harvey Oswald, hurrying south. I don't know if that means he was running or walking fast, but it was about 60 feet away and he's watching him. And Calloway was close enough that he could describe him as, quote, a white male, approximately 27 years old, 5'11", 165 pounds, black, wavy hair. That's interesting. No photo I've ever seen of Lee Harvey Oswald shows anything resembling black, wavy hair. Fair complected, wearing a white shirt. So you see the bottom photo there. This is where he was standing as he watched Oswald run past. So here's the scenario. We've got Jimmy Burt, we've got Warren Reynolds, we've got Ted Calloway following the doppelganger as he leaves the scene of the crime, while the real Lee Harvey Oswald sitting in the Texas Theater. 107 is the time, according to Butch Burroughs, that he was giving him the ticket that he just bought from Julia Postal as he's entering the theater. 1 mile away, somebody all these witnesses are going to describe as Lee Harvey Oswald is fleeing a crime scene. And according to witnesses, the real Lee Harvey Oswald at the theater is wearing a dark brown long sleeve shirt. And the man fleeing the scene is wearing alternatively, you're going to see different accounts by different witnesses. Sometimes he's wearing that Eisenhower jacket, which was light colored. Sometimes he's just wearing a white t-shirt. Clearly not the same person, though they look alike. Back to Warren Reynolds. If you look at this map, you can see I've put in red boxes here where Ted Calloway was and where Warren Reynolds was. And then the red arrows obviously show the route that the doppelganger was taking. So Reynolds worked at across the street from Deutsch Motors, and he also worked at an auto dealership. And he joins Calloway. Calloway and Reynolds both see the young man walking south, and they're both sort of following him. All right, we'll come back to them in a minute here. Meanwhile, as I indicated, Lee Harvey Oswald has entered the theater, and according to Butch Burroughs and Julia Postal, both of whom say he's not wearing a dark colored jacket, he's just wearing a dark brown shirt, long sleeve shirt. He buys a ticket from Julia Postal here at this, that's her picture there, and that is in the middle picture, that's what the ticket booth looks like, which is interesting because it's recessed in off the street. In other words, it sits back off the sidewalk, and if you're looking down the sidewalk, it doesn't jut out into the sidewalk so you could see someone buying a ticket. It's back hidden in the entryway of the theater, which brings into question Johnny Brewer. We'll get to him in a minute. But anyway, you're sort of hidden from view from anyone else along the sidewalk if you step into that entryway to buy a ticket. Burroughs works the ticket counter where you've all seen the counter that you walk through when you buy a ticket and you hand it to the second. You buy the ticket from the first person. That's all she does. She sells the tickets. And then you hand it to the manager, whomever was at the counter. And according to Butch Burroughs, that all happened at 107. And a minute earlier, Tippit was shot 1 mile away on 10th Street. So we have a problem here. 8 minutes later, Burroughs says Oswald came back out into the concessions area at 1:15 and bought popcorn from him. So for 8 minutes, from 1:07 to 1:15, Burroughs has two occasions to interact with Lee Harvey Oswald. Once when he takes his ticket, the other when he sells him popcorn. Julia Postal has one interaction with him, selling the ticket to him. Later, I think it was the next day actually, Jones Harris, who specializes in assassination investigations, was brought in from New York City. He interviewed Julia Postal. And he asked her, did you sell a ticket to the man who they later arrested and took out the front? And she said no. When clearly she did, but she's being fooled like the rest of us are being fooled because there's two Oswalds in the theater at that time. And the one being arrested looks just like the one that she was told snuck in. So she's sticking to her story. Remember, she's the one that called the cops. Somebody snuck in without paying. And so all the cops show up to arrest the guy who snuck in without paying. And they look the same, right? So her story was, yeah, that's the guy. She pointed him out. And so when Jones Harris shows up the next day and says, are you sure? She bursts into tears. So he leaves, comes back a little bit later, and asks her again. She bursts into tears again. Clearly, Julia Postal is realizing that she fingered the wrong guy. And she's having a moment of, she's got a moment of regret. I don't know what you call it, but so Harris, at least, was convinced that Postal knew that the reason she's bursting out in tears like this is because she knows that she sold a ticket to this guy. And the story is falling apart about how everybody knew that this was the guy and how he got into the theater. Because the guy she sold the ticket to was at 1:07. The guy who snuck in was at 1:35. So imagine you're Julia Postal and you're realizing they got the wrong guy. And the guy who snuck in must have got away. But now you got to stick to your story because that's what you said the day before. But you feel guilty. You feel some measure of regret about it. Butch Burroughs told Jim Mars that Postal knew she sold Oswald a ticket at 1:07. Burroughs said that he had taken Oswald's ticket and he also sold him popcorn. The problem is Postal stuck to her story. No, I didn't sell him that ticket. Burroughs stuck to his story. Yes, we did sell him a ticket. And yes, I did sell him popcorn. So it's interesting who the Warren Commission will believe because Postal's story will not contradict the narrative. Burroughs' story will. So Burroughs is going to have to be the story that gets discredited because it destroys the whole timeline. If he, according to Burroughs, was there at 1:07 and 1:15 and all points in between, then he couldn't be at the tippit scene at the same time. Now, some pretty interesting behavior by Oswald when he gets to the theater. And this is according to witnesses that are inside the theater. It wasn't packed. Total, I think there was 24 witnesses inside when he at the time of his arrest. But as you can see here, the layout and where people were sitting. According to Jack Davis, who was sitting, I've got him circled there in yellow. He's sitting in the back on the if you're facing the screen, you'd be on the back of the right side of the theater. Anyway, According to Jack Davis, Oswald walked into this lower level of the theater and sat right next to him, which is odd. If you've ever been to a theater, especially if there's open seats everywhere, you don't go sit right next to somebody. You leave a seat in between so you can put your elbows on the handles, etc. But he sat right next to him. That that's sort of an uncomfortable feeling when somebody comes and sits right next to you, and there's all these open seats. So of course Davis is going to remember that. Remember, Oswald always does things that draw people's attention that they remember. When he jumped on the bus, he banged on the door, made a big scene. When he jumped in the cab, he sat in the front. Right. And in both cases, the bus driver and the cabbie, that's what they remembered. So here's Jack Davis saying, well, he sat right next to me. It was kind of weird. And after a few minutes, he said Oswald just got up, walked back out to the concession. And then he re-enters the theater and takes a seat next to a man on the back row, directly across the aisle from Davis. So, the movie hasn't started. So you're just sitting there. You really don't have anything to do except to watch each other or the previews or whatever they're up. But so he's watching this. He sits across from him in the back row. And then he gets up and he leaves and he goes out to the concession area again. So Davis is curious now. He's really watching him. This time he comes back in, takes a seat across the aisle again from Mr. Davis, and moves to another seat on the fourth row. So he keeps coming and going. He never takes the same seat. He's moving around. And he's moved around from seat to seat. Finally takes a seat next to a pregnant woman, right next to a pregnant woman. Which I've thought about that. Why would a pregnant woman be at a 1:00 movie showing in the middle of the day? But regardless. And after a few minutes, she gets up, goes to the bathroom, and never comes back. It's like he creeped her out or something. Or maybe she was a contact. I don't know. But according to Davis, she never came back. So he's moving. Now, we're going to get into the reasons why this behavior is taking place. But I just wanted to explain to you in preparation of that, let you get a visual for him coming in, sitting, leaving, coming in, sitting, leaving, coming in, sitting. And during that time, he never sits in the same seat twice. And Jack Davis is watching all this. We'll talk about some of these other witnesses later. Excuse me. Meanwhile, back to the doppelganger. It's now 1:08. Reynolds, who's come across the street now, actually, he's crossed Patton and he's following on the other side of Jefferson. He's following the doppelganger. Something about him ain't right. And he sees the doppelganger tuck a gun underneath his belt as he turns the corner onto Jefferson. He starts walking west on Jefferson. And so Reynolds follows him from across the street, which means the doppelganger is doing his job. On the south, now you'll see what happens is at some point, the doppelganger turns, he's on Jefferson, then he makes a right-hand turn, and he heads at an angle across back towards that street in between 10th and Jefferson. I can't quite read it. Sanguiniard. I'm not sure what that is. Anyway, and so at that point, Reynolds follows him. He crosses Jefferson, and he follows behind him. And this is a picture of his affidavit, his statement to police. Benavides, meanwhile, next, as he's sitting there still parked, he sees Westbrook get out of his car, and maybe it's the first time he noticed the police car was there. I don't know. but he notices Westbrook get out, and Westbrook approaches Tippit's body, which is lying in the street in front of the police car. And he looks at the body, and then he turns around and goes back to the hidden police car, lets his partner, Croy, out, and then slowly backs the police car out the alley and out of sight. Benavides sitting there 15 feet away watching the whole thing. Now, no question, Westbrook was aware that Benavides was sitting there in his truck, witnessing the whole thing. And this is going to be an issue because that links Dallas police, who are going to be literally first on the scene within seconds. And if Benavides tells his story and is believed, it's going to link Dallas police to the murder of Officer Tippit. It's interesting. 2 months later, Domingo, Benavides' brother, who was looks identical to Domingo Benavides, was shot and killed. And Benavides was convinced that was because of mistaken identity. They were trying to shoot him because of the inconvenient story that he had to share about what he saw, which is one of the reasons why Benavides clammed up, because Benavides was also aware that Westbrook saw him. So both sides know the other side saw him. Westbrook knows Benavides watching everything he does. Benavides knows that Westbrook knows he's there. And that's why he did not immediately report the presence of the Dallas police car and the two officers. He was afraid. And look what happened to his brother. Look what happened to a lot of JFK witnesses. So Benavides sees Westbrook pull the car or back the car out the alley, and Croy gets out. Croy remains at the scene. Now, Benavides has no reason to suspect anything at this point. A Dallas police officer is standing there guarding the scene. He thinks it's a Dallas police officer. He's not sure because the man doesn't appear to be wearing a police uniform. He's got a dark colored jacket on over his uniform, as it turns out, because later we see pictures of Croy without the dark colored jacket, and he's back wearing his hat again. But in the moments that Benavides saw him, which is the direct, 1, 2, 3 minutes after, he's disguising the fact that he's a police officer by wearing this dark colored jacket. This is clearly an effort by Croy to make it look like he's just a witness. It's not Dallas police that were on the scene that quickly, trying to avoid that witnesses connecting Dallas police to the shooting. They can't be there that quick. If they were there that quick, they must have been there throughout and witnessed the whole thing. In other words, they were part of it. So when he's standing out there, initially, he's wearing that dark colored jacket. And where did he get this dark colored jacket? We already know that there was a little trip that Westbrook and Croy took from Oswald's rooming house to the theater. We know that when Oswald left the rooming house, he was wearing a dark colored jacket. We know when he got to the theater, he was not. That dark colored jacket is Lee Harvey Oswald's jacket. Croy's got it on over his uniform. He's got to be careful. If witnesses see him there so soon after Tippit was shot, they're going to consider him a suspect. So he covers his uniform. Now, after some time goes by and other folks start showing up, he takes the jacket off, puts his hat back on, and now, presto, he's a Dallas policeman on the scene. And eventually, this light colored jacket or dark colored jacket would be placed over Tippit's dead body. So that dark colored jacket, when you follow the journey of that dark colored jacket, remember in the morning, it started off in the Texas School Book Depository building because Oswald was wearing it. Buell Wesley Frazier said it. He said so. Then he gets in the cab. He's still wearing it. William Whaley said so. The bus driver said so. All these witnesses saw it. Then all of a sudden it disappears on the car ride over in Westbrook and Croy's car to the theater. And now Croy's using it, first to disguise himself and second to cover the dead body of Tippit. "108, hell, now here's Croy in his uniform. He's got his hat back on. Now, according to Benavides, he put that jacket on. And then when the witnesses came out, he starts talking to these witnesses. He takes the jacket off, puts his hat on. So here's a picture of him talking to Helen Markham at approximately 108. And she says uh, that an unknown man was standing beside her. He had a hat on. I thought it was a policeman. And of course, the only policeman at the scene of the Tippit shooting before the ambulance got there was Croy. So Croy comes out in the jacket without the hat. Then the witnesses start coming out of their houses onto the street. Next thing you know, the jacket is on Tippit. Croy's got his hat on and his uniform, and now he's a cop. And that's what the witnesses are going to say. It's not just Helen Markham. Others are going to say the same thing. Virginia Davis and her sister Barbara Davis, who live in this home, and that's the 400 address there right on the corner. The red circles were Tippit's cars. You see how close it is. And she tells the Warren Commission, we saw the boy, she calls the doppelganger the boy, he's so young looking, cutting across the street. After he disappeared around the corner, her corner, we ran out in the front yard. She let the guy clear. And then she goes out in the front yard to see what happened. I saw the policeman lying in the street. So the attorney asked her, did the police come out there? Yes, they were already there. Phelan says, by the time you got there? And she says, yes, sir. So this is the second witness that Croy, a Dallas police officer with a hat and his uniform, is standing guarding the crime scene. But what's interesting is when he first came out, he came out wearing that dark jacket. And now the dark jacket's covering the body. So evidently in his mind, enough time has gone by. Doesn't seem like enough time, but 2 minutes, I guess. But he has now revealed himself to be a Dallas police officer. Virginia Davis sees it. Barbara Davis sees him. Helen Markham sees him. And we got that picture. That's the route that the young boy took. You can see that's her house on the corner. He runs right to their yard. And witnesses say that he was emptying the 38, the shell casings, as he ran to that yard. So what happens next? Jimmy Burt at 108 hurries to 10th and Patton moments after the shooting and follows the young man as he walks. I've drawn it in a purple arrow here. So you can see Jimmy Burt is following behind the doppelganger. Warren Reynolds is going to see him approaching. So Warren Reynolds initially is in front of the doppelganger as the doppelganger runs towards him. Jimmy Burt is behind him. Ted Calloway is sort of to the side. So they've got him on three sides. One is behind a witness, one to the side, and one in front. So they're watching him pretty close. Now, according to Burt, the young man was wearing a light colored jacket, that Eisenhower style light colored jacket. Now, I've wondered about that because other witnesses say he was wearing a white t-shirt, which we know was underneath. So was he putting the jacket on? Was he taking it off? I don't know. Nobody sees him in a dark colored jacket, is my point. He's either in a white t-shirt or he's in a dark, light colored jacket. So Burt, who's following behind, watches as he turns right on Jefferson and he starts walking down Jefferson. Burt reaches, now I had to draw it in because on this map, the alley isn't shown. If you look there between 10th Street and Jefferson, this is why I couldn't find that street name earlier. It's not a street, it's an alley. And you see it there behind the crime scene. You can see the alley. I had to draw in the white alleyway there. And he is running by that alley. And as he runs by that alley, Jimmy Burt, he turns and he looks. And as he looks, he sees, as you see that purple arrow there, the doppelganger has run. He's turned right and he's running across the alley a block away. And Bert sees him. He sees through the alley and he sees the young man walking north, crossing the same alley, going towards the Texaco parking lot and the back side of the Abundant Life Church. I've drawn in the Abundant Life Church locations, the black box there. The Texaco station, as you can see, is indicated below. I've got it highlighted, and it is where that red dot is. In other words, the doppelganger ran right by it, right past it, past the back side of it, and he's running towards the Abundant Life Church location. And that's what Jimmy Burt sees through the alleyway. And Warren Reynolds sees it because he's run and he's chasing him from behind. Ted Calloway's sitting there watching this whole thing. Now, here is a very important detail. According to Burt, when he sees him cross that alleyway, headed towards the Abundant Life Church, the doppelganger is still wearing this jacket, which is a Warren Commission exhibit here. It's the light colored jacket. In other words, he has not yet discarded this jacket. Now, that's important because he has passed the Texaco station. He's crossed the alleyway, and now he's headed towards the Abundant Life Church. He's still wearing the jacket. Very important detail, and you'll see why later. But he has not discarded the jacket. He's still wearing it. I'll just kind of give you a teaser. Where they're going to find this jacket is behind the Texaco station, underneath a car. And guess who's going to find it? Westbrook, of course. But according to Jimmy Burt, when he passes the Texaco station and leaves it behind and is now headed to the Abundant Life Church, which is about half a block away, he still has the jacket on. That is a very important detail. All right, 109. Warren Reynolds, who has followed the guy all the way over, he's about 2 blocks. He's followed behind him. The young man, the doppelganger, crosses the alley behind the Texaco station, and he hurries over to a police car, which is parked on Crawford Street. All right, Crawford Street is right where that red arrow is. That's Crawford. I've marked the spot with a red X. It's right next to the Abundant Life Church. Now you see how far away the Texaco station is. They've left that behind. It's about a block away. They're now on to the Abundant Life next to this church. And that's where the police car, Warren Reynolds sees, and it's police car number 207 again, which means when Westbrook backed out of that alley, he went right to this Abundant Life Church. He's sitting there like it's a prearranged meet spot. Here comes the doppelganger. He's run this circuitous route to get to this spot. He's attracted the attention of Jimmy Burt, Smith, Ted Calloway, Warren Reynolds, and he arrives at the scene and he begins talking to the officer. This is now the second time within 3 minutes that the Oswald doppelganger is having a conversation with a Dallas police officer. The first time was Tippit through the side window, the passenger window, whom he later shot. Now the second one is with Westbrook next to the Abundant Life Church. Warren Reynolds is standing there watching it. Now, here's where you have to use some reasoning, because at this point, it's the only point witnessed by anybody that the doppelganger is talking to a Dallas police officer and has opportunity to dump the 38, his light colored jacket, and his wallet. Because what happens next and who is in possession of those items strongly indicates that it had to be here, and it had to be Westbrook. There's no other explanation for it. Jimmy Burt said he's still wearing his jacket, which means he didn't ditch it at the Texaco station. So then when Westbrook later comes up, says he finds it, it's because Westbrook had it. When did Westbrook get it? Right here. When Westbrook produces a wallet later, when did he get it? When did he get this wallet? It's right here. When the 38, the murder weapon, the tippit murder weapon, later appears at the Texas Theater. How did the murder weapon get from here to the Texas Theater? Allegedly in the possession of Lee Harvey Oswald. How did that happen? Unless Westbrook got it here and planted it on Oswald at the theater. In other words, this is the location, the reason for this meetup. They're not talking, Westbrook, let's just assume for a minute Westbrook was an honest broker. He just witnessed this guy kill his partner. If he's doing anything, he should be arresting him. So we know he's not an honest broker. He's arranged for this. This is a prearranged meet spot for him to take off of the doppelganger the evidence that he's going to need to set somebody up, to frame somebody. And that's where it happens. So that's, and boy, that Jimmy Burt testimony that he was still wearing his jacket, that really is a key detail. Very, very important detail. So what happens to Warren Reynolds, just a side note, because he had a story to tell, very inconvenient to the narrative. January 23, 64. I mean, you're talking about 2 months, right? Almost to the day. He gets shot in the head with a .22 rifle. He survives, but that wasn't the intention. He was supposed to be killed on that day. By the way, he's not going to be the only one that ends up a statistic like this. So he gets shot in the head. Benavides' brother, 2 months later, gets shot in the head. Benavides is convinced that it was a case of mistaken identity because they looked identical. So in both cases, these two witnesses who have inconvenient, and before they can testify to the Warren Commission, somebody tries to kill both of them because their story doesn't agree with the narrative. Reynolds was a witness that could connect the Oswald doppelganger with Dallas police. He witnessed a meetup at that Abundant Life church. Benavides was a witness that could connect the doppelganger to Westbrook, to Dallas police, because he witnessed him talking through the window to Tippit, and then Westbrook sitting there in his police car watching the whole thing, coming out and looking at the body. He witnessed the whole thing. In this case, regarding Warren Reynolds, the assailant was a man named Darrell Wayne Garner. And he got off because he was alibied by a woman named Betty Mooney MacDonald, who worked for Jack Ruby at the Carousel Club. She gave him an alibi. So he was released. A month later, not even like 3 weeks later, MacDonald gets arrested for something else, disturbing the peace. And the next day, she's found hanging in her jail cell by her own pants. So the bodies are starting to appear. You could imagine a scenario where MacDonald, in an effort to save herself, or maybe has said something in jail or to a cop when questioned about whatever disturbing the peace might mean. Maybe she was a loose end, and they were afraid she was going to tell what she knew. She'd been put up to stand in or provide an alibi for this guy. And to keep her quiet, they killed her. They'd already tried to kill the witness that, Warren Reynolds. and they'd already tried to kill Benavides. So witnesses are dropping like flies already within a month or two of the assassination. Now look what they do with the timeline. Remember now, the witnesses say that Oswald or the doppelganger shot Tippit at 106. But the Warren Commission, the FBI, the Dallas police, they're going to maintain that Oswald did it and that he walked 1 mile from his rooming house to the Tippit scene. Now, you can't do that when he was last viewed at 103 and the shooting happened at 106. That's not possible. So they're going to change, even though he was put in the ambulance at 111, he was shot at 106, put in the ambulance at 111, pronounced dead at 115. That's what happened. They changed the time of death or the time of the shooting to the time of the pronouncement of death. In other words, 106 instantly becomes 115. They conflate the two. Yes, he was pronounced dead at 115, but he was dead the second his body hit the ground, especially when the doppelganger comes back, puts another coup de grace right in his head. He's dead. That's when the witnesses said the shooting at 106. Well, because he didn't get to the hospital until 115 or thereabouts, they pronounced him dead at 115. In the police report afterwards, in the autopsy report, they mark the time of death to be 115, or the time of the shooting to be 115, which now gives Oswald more time. If he was last seen standing on his corner at 103, 12 minutes is enough time. It's still you're hurrying along, but you can get 1 mile in 12 minutes on foot to kill Tippit. You can't get there in 3 minutes. That additional 9 minutes, it's a small detail, but it's an important detail. They monkeyed with, here's I think I blew this up. Here it is. This is Helen Markham's statement on the left. At approximately 1:06 p.m., blah, 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 blah. She talks about the shooting. And then you look over on the right, and the autopsy report says the time of death is 1:15. And that became the time. If you look up in the Warren report, this is the official time that they claim is the time of the shooting. And that's how they monkeyed with the time to give Oswald time to get from his rooming house to the Tippit scene. They just changed the time of death from 1:06 to 1:15 because it's clear if you just go by the witnesses and the time frame, it's not possible. If you're trying to frame Oswald for the crime, you can't because the timeline doesn't make sense. Look at, I've put in these stars here. This is the distance. If you look at my cursor at the top star here, that's his rooming house. Over on the middle star, that's Officer Tippit's death scene. Down here at the bottom, that's the Texas Theater. So what they're saying is he went from point A to point B in 12 minutes because they can't say he went from point A to point B in 3 minutes. It's not possible. Then they're saying he escaped, and according to witnesses at the theater, he arrived at the theater 1 minute later from point B to point C. Again, not possible. So that's why they're going to go with the doppelganger's time. When he gets there at 1:35, that becomes the official timeline. So and you can do that when you have two Oswalds instead of one, right? We know that Oswald was already here at the theater at 1:07, meaning he never went to this scene, point B. He was never at the Tippit scene. And he only got there because Westbrook and Croy picked him up and took him from point A to point C. It only took him a minute or two in a car. So to include, this is This is a big clue as to the problem that they're facing. Tippit wasn't supposed to be shot. This was not supposed to happen. This was not part of the plan, I don't believe. And I'll get into why I believe that more. But you can see now all of a sudden they're scrambling with timelines and evidence because the plan has fallen apart. This is our second mix-up now. The first mix-up was Tippit did not see Oswald come across the bridge in the bus because he wasn't in the bus. He was supposed to get him to the theater, and Tippit didn't do that. Now, whether it was his fault or not, that's a different story. But that was supposed to happen, and it didn't happen. And now Tippit's running around like a crazy man trying to find him, and it's led to a second mix-up with it, which is his death, his own death. And now we've got another situation to fix. And from here on out, it's just cleanup. It's just cleanup. So you look at the eyewitnesses, they said that Oswald was waiting for a bus in front of his rooming house at 103. Now, he never took the bus because Westbrook took him. Eyewitnesses say Tippit was murdered at 106, which makes Oswald, it's impossible for him to get there on foot. And then, according to eyewitnesses, he's at the Texas Theater between 107 and 115. So that means the Tippit scene, if you just go by the eyewitnesses, completely excludes Lee Harvey Oswald. Somebody else had to have done it. Of course, we know it was a doppelganger, but Dallas police, the FBI, Warren Commission got to shoehorn this evidence somehow to include the Tippit scene in Oswald's itinerary. And that means these eyewitnesses and all their stories about times got to go away. They got to provide an alternate timeline. So what happens next? 120 to 124. Westbrook, who last we saw was at the Abundant Life location, meeting with the doppelganger, getting his 38, his wallet, and his light colored jacket. Now he leaves. He's left the Tippit scene. Now he leaves the Abundant Life location. And he drives back across the bridge into Dallas, goes to the Texas School Book Depository building, and switches out his car. Drops car 207 off where it was parked originally, picks up his unmarked dark blue police car, and now comes back across the bridge to rejoin the hunt, as if he's a different person now, because he's driving a different car. But he doesn't go back to the Tippit scene. He goes behind the Texaco station, which is 2 blocks away from the Tippit scene, and plants the light colored jacket that he just took off of the doppelganger underneath this car. And then voila, claims that he finds it. Now remember, very important detail, Jimmy Burt saw the doppelganger after he passed this location and was another block away at the Abundant Life Church, still wearing the Eisenhower style jacket, the light colored jacket. So did Warren Reynolds. But now, and now Westbrook is saying, no, I found it under this car behind the Texaco station. And it's interesting. He doesn't go back to the Tippit scene. This is where he goes. So 124, he finds this light colored jacket, which should cause you to stop and think on 2 different levels here. First, why is Westbrook alleging to have found a jacket in a location where Jimmy Burt, a witness, said the doppelganger had already passed that location and he was still wearing the jacket? Now, we got that problem. But the second problem we have is if Westbrook is trying to frame somebody, it's not Lee Harvey Oswald because all the eyewitnesses that morning and even afternoon say he was wearing a dark colored jacket. They have his dark colored jacket. If they wanted to frame Oswald, the real Oswald, then throw the dark colored jacket under the car. But they don't. They throw the light colored jacket under the car. That should start you thinking about who they're really trying to frame here. And it gets better. Earlene Roberts told the FBI in the moments after when she was first questioned that she saw car 207 pull up to the curb, honk a couple times like it was a signal. And that became a huge problem for the whole story. I mean, because that looks like, here, you can see what it looks like. Dallas police is consorting or giving rides or conspiring with the alleged assassin, giving him signals, picking him up, pulling up to his house, right? That's a huge problem. Especially when you add in what Warren Reynolds said about the 207 car being at the Abundant Life Church after being at the tippit scene. And there's a bunch of witnesses to the 207 car being at the tippit scene. In other words, this 207 car is everywhere it's not supposed to be. And so they got a problem. If you study what happened to Earlene Roberts subsequent to this testimony, she got badgered by the Dallas police to no end. They would call her employers. She got fired from 3 consecutive jobs within a couple months of this. Couldn't keep a job because the Dallas police harassed her at every turn, harassed her employer. She was just a housekeeper. She died within 2 years of a heart attack. According to Dallas police, she died at her home. No autopsy. Because here is another witness who has a story to tell that connects Dallas police to the assassination, to the person that they arrested and alleged killed the president. We've already seen witnesses Benavides and Warren Reynolds and their stories connecting Dallas police to doppelganger. Now we see Dallas police connected to the alleged assassin by another witness, Earlene Roberts. And bad things happen to all 3 of them. They shot Benavides' brother, thinking it was him. They shot Warren Reynolds right in the head. Somehow he lived. And Earlene Roberts, they tried to apply the Julia Postal pressure to Earlene Roberts, and she resisted initially, but eventually caved. And to the Warren Commission, changed her story and started saying it was car 106 or 107, whatever. But that was several months after. She initially told FBI it was 207. And then all the pressure comes before she goes to the Warren Commission. Then she changes the story. But her heart couldn't take it, evidently, and she died. And she lost all these jobs. It's the same pressure they applied to Quilla Clemens. All these witnesses who didn't agree with the narrative. And it wasn't that they didn't agree, they were just telling what they knew. They were threatened, they were bullied, harassed. In this case, the Warren Commission asked Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry to go back and retrace the movements of car 207 and give a report. And this is the report that he gave to the Warren Commission. And of course, it was signed by Westbrook. It says, "Sir, Officer J.M. Valentine was operating 207. Remember, it was parked, and this car was parked at Houston and Elm. And Valentine was assisting in the search of the school depository building. That's what was parked at the depository building. The keys to car 207 were given to Sergeant J.A. Putnam, along with keys from other cars parked in the immediate vicinity, and released the 3rd Platoon commander at City Hall at approximately 3:30. In other words, what they're saying is car 207 was at the Texas School Book Depository building all day. It never left. And the car that Westbrook and Croy were in, run around Oak Cliff, it wasn't 207. I don't know what you guys saw. I don't know what these witnesses saw, but we were not in car 207. And of course, this evidence is submitted by Westbrook himself. And so the Warren Commission washed its hands of it. And the Earlene Roberts problem went away. So where are we now? 1:30. Last we saw at 1:20, let's see, 1:24, Westbrook has just planted this jacket underneath the car at the Texaco station. And the doppelganger is in the wind somewhere between the Abundant Life Church and the Texas Theater. At 1:30, the doppelganger, who is fitting the description of the alleged assassin that's being broadcast all out on the radio, and also the tippit assailant. He's fitting the, of course he's fitting, he is the tippit assailant, one of them, is spotted going up Jefferson Avenue past Hardy's shoe store. And a Hardy's shoe store salesman, he was actually the assistant manager, named Johnny Brewer, alleges that he saw him lurking in front of his storefront at 1:30. So here is top left. If you go out front of Hardy's shoe store and look down the sidewalk in the direction of the Texas Theater, this is the view that you'd see. Now you can see, as you look up that street, you cannot see the ticket bubble sticking out, the ticket booth sticking out into the sidewalk, which would enable Johnny Brewer to see if that guy snuck in without buying a ticket or not. It's recessed. If you look at the top right, you can see how the entryway kind of envelopes around the ticket booth. And from the sidewalk where Johnny Brewer was, you could not see if this man paid for a ticket or snuck in. That's another important detail. Look at the bottom picture. You can see the approximate distance. It's pretty close from the Hardy shoes to the Texas Theater. In the middle, you see an arrow pointing to a cutout there. In 63, that was an alley. It's a doorway and it's a part of the building now, but that used to be an alley which connected to the back alley. That is, remember now, when Oswald was taken from his rooming house to the Texas Theater, he was brought to a back alley by Westbrook and Croy and dropped there. And then Westbrook and Croy continued on to 10th Street. Oswald came up that alley through that narrow entryway there, out onto Jefferson Street, made a right-hand turn, and went to the theater. That's how he did it. So he was brought from his rooming house to a back alley through which he connected to Jefferson Street by another alley, this one between two buildings. And then he was only exposed on Jefferson Street for about half a block there before he bought a ticket. At 1:35, according to Johnny Brewer, he spots the doppelganger sneaking into the Texas Theater. This is what he tells police, and this is why they end up calling the police. And he's sort of following behind on the sidewalk. But as you can see in this top left-hand picture, there is no way Johnny Brewer can see if this doppelganger bought a ticket or snuck into the theater. You can see him enter. You can assume that that's where he went, but you can't see if he bought a ticket or not. That ticket booth sits back. It's about 8 to 10 feet back. I've been there, and I went and stood right in front of the ticket booth, and I looked out. All I can see is straight ahead because the entryway comes up around me. I can't see down to Hardy's shoe store. I can't see past the front part of the sidewalk. I can't see the sidewalk going in either direction at all. So if I was standing in front of the ticket booth buying a ticket and somebody was watching me from the sidewalk in the direction of Hardy's shoe store, they couldn't see me and I couldn't see them. That's the point. So it makes you wonder about Johnny Brewer. So the question is, how did Johnny Brewer know all of this? It all comes back to a guy named Tommy Rowe. Tommy Rowe worked with Johnny Brewer at the same shoe store. But Tommy Rowe was a close friend of Jack Ruby's. In fact, in 1963, after Jack Ruby shot Oswald, guess who moved into Jack Ruby's abandoned apartment? It's Tommy Rowe. 4 years later, when Jim Garrison is investigating down in New Orleans and he comes to Dallas to interview people, he interviews Tommy Rowe, his investigators interview, and they go to Tommy Rowe's house, which is Jack Ruby's old apartment. He's still living there 4 years later, 223 Ewing Street. So Tommy Rowe and Jack Ruby are like this. Now, according to Seth Cantor, Ruby was at Parkland Hospital shortly after the president was shot, shortly after he arrived there. And according to another witness named George Applin, Ruby was at the Texas Theater at the time all of this was going down. In fact, according to Applin, he was sitting right behind Oswald's last location. But you can see there, Oswald is in the light blue towards the back there in the middle section. And right behind him was somebody seated whom George Applin claimed was Jack Ruby. And he had a conversation with him. We'll get to that later. But so Jack Ruby's in the theater. And he is watching the same thing that Jack Davis has been watching. Oswald's moving around from seat to seat. And he contacts his friend Tommy Rowe. Now, this is according to Tommy Rowe. Tommy Rowe told Jim Garrison's investigators this. So I'm not making this up. Jack Ruby contacted Tommy Rowe at the shoe store and said, Oswald, tells him what he's watching. He says, he's here. He's in the theater. I'm sitting here looking at him. And so Rowe goes to Johnny Brewer and tells him there's a suspicious man at the Texas Theater. He's wearing a brown sports shirt. That's what he tells him, which, of course, Lee Harvey Oswald was wearing a long-sleeve brown shirt. That's what Tommy Rowe told Johnny Brewer. And he prodded Johnny Brewer to go down there and tell Julia Postal to call the police about this suspicious man that's in the theater. And he made up this story about following the doppelganger and about how he didn't buy a ticket, he snuck in. And that's the pretext that Tommy Rowe sold Julia Postal to get her to call the police because someone snuck in without paying. When in reality, Tommy Rowe is doing the bidding of Jack Ruby, who's telling him the suspicious man is sitting here right in front of me. And he goes through Tommy Rowe, his friend, who goes through Johnny Brewer, his boss, to go down there and convince Julia Postal to call the police. Rowe told Garrison's investigators that it was he who told Johnny Brewer about the suspicious man wearing the brown shirt and about how he had snuck into the Texas Theater. It was he who convinced Brewer to call the police, which is why when Brewer described the man that he saw sneaking into the theater wearing a brown shirt, couldn't have been the doppelganger. He's saying at 1:35, I saw that guy sneak into the theater. Well, the guy sneaking into the theater was wearing a white t-shirt. The guy with the brown shirt had been there from 107 on. He didn't walk by his building. Johnny Brewer is claiming that he saw somebody suspicious walk in front of his building at 1:30. That's the doppelganger. The real Lee Harvey Oswald was already there. So when he's telling police, I saw a guy in a brown shirt sneak in, first of all, he didn't see anybody sneak in because they couldn't from the sidewalk. We've already established that. Secondly, he got the wrong guy because he's going by the description that Jack Ruby gave to Tommy Rowe that Tommy Rowe gave to him. He never actually saw him. He was just repeating what Ruby told Rowe and Rowe told him, Brewer. So Brewer closes the story. He runs down to the theater and he coerces Julia Postal into calling the police, which she does. And of course, she never saw the doppelganger sneak in either. That's how he snuck in. He snuck in, so she didn't see. What she saw was at 107, she sold a ticket to the guy wearing the brown shirt. And that's why she bursts into tears later when she realizes, oops, I pointed out the wrong guy. I took the word of Johnny Brewer. Johnny Brewer took the word of Tommy Rowe. Tommy Rowe took the word of Jack Ruby. And of course, Jack Ruby was there doing what he was supposed to do. He was the inside infiltrator, so to speak, to pass the word that the subject is now in place, ready to be arrested. It's unbelievable. So at 1:35, here's the scenario we have. Oswald, wearing the brown shirt, is on the main floor. Having been there since 107, he's looking for his contact. And when we get to further in this presentation, I'll explain what I mean by looking for his contact. We've already seen he's moving around from seat to seat, but there's evidence on his person that proves that he's looking for a contact. According to George Applin, Jack Ruby is sitting right behind this guy that they later come in and arrest, Oswald. Applin later will, after Ruby shoots Oswald, Applin will tell this story. He said, that's the guy I saw in the theater. Seth Canterell said, that's the guy I talked to at the hospital. Meanwhile, the Oswald doppelganger, instead of going through the bottom doors here, which goes into the main, he goes up the stairs into the balcony, having just arrived at 1:35. Now he's sitting up in the balcony wearing his white shirt, completely hidden from view, overlooking everything down below. And this is the problem now. We have both Oswalds in the same location at the same time, and they're nearly identical. They're so identical, all the witnesses who have been following the doppelganger all this time, consistently, every time when they're asked and shown a picture of Lee Harvey Oswald, they say, yes, that's who I saw. And they're both in the same building at the same time. Just like they were when the day started at the Texas School Book Depository building. Only then, it was the doppelganger on the 6th floor. No doubt leaving incriminating evidence there on the 6th floor. And the real Lee Harvey Oswald on the 2nd floor in the break room. But from there, they've gone their separate directions. But the doppelganger always following behind in the footsteps of Oswald, or what was supposed to be the footsteps of Oswald, ending up in the same place. And this was not supposed to happen. Both men were not supposed to end up in the same place at the same time. Which is why what happens next is going to be another big problem. So what happens next? At 1:37, Westbrook drives back to the Tippit murder scene. He's placed the jacket underneath the car at the Texaco station, claims he's found the jacket, ditched by Oswald in his escape from the Tippit scene, right? But of course, it's the light colored jacket, which doesn't incriminate Oswald, incriminates the doppelganger. He goes back to the Tippit scene, and now he's driving that different car. He's not in the 207 car. He's driving his blue unmarked car. He has to be careful because there were witnesses there that might have remembered that he was the guy that went out and checked the body. So that's why he switched cars, so as not to be the same car returning to the scene. It's a different car. People assume it's a different person. When he gets there, he starts showing fellow police officers the wallet. This is the wallet he took off of the doppelganger at the Abundant Life Church. We're going to find out. We already know because Oswald, the real Lee Harvey Oswald, bought a ticket and then bought popcorn at the theater. So he still has his wallet. And we're going to find out at the time of arrest, he's got his wallet. We're also going to find out at the scene when they do a report of everyone, all the witnesses that are in that theater, including the doppelganger up in the balcony, that only one person didn't have any ID on him, no wallet, and it was the doppelganger. And I'll tell you how we know that when we get to it. But so this is the doppelganger's wallet. Westbrook has already planted the doppelganger's jacket. Now he's showing all the police officers at the tippit scene the doppelganger's wallet, which has two IDs in it, Oswald and Alec Heidel. And unfortunately for the Dallas police, but fortunately for us, a news camera got a picture of them going through the wallet on the scene, and that's the picture of it. So here's what you got. Down here where my cursor is, the circle with the two dots, this is where the jacket was found. As soon as he's found the jacket, now he goes back to the tippit scene. You see how close they are. Obviously, he drives over there and he arrives back, and now he's showing all these new witnesses some new evidence. That's this wallet that he says he found. It's interesting. Westbrook keeps finding things that nobody else is finding. Though he left the scene, though the witnesses who were out there guarding the body along with Croy didn't see a wallet. Here comes Westbrook with a wallet. Where'd he get it? He got it from the doppelganger at the Abundant Life Church parking lot. Bob Barrett, an FBI agent, pictured here on the right, arrives at 142, parks his car, and he walks over towards Tippit's car. And Barrett says, quote, "I went on over there and Captain Westbrook was there with several of his officers. It hadn't been very long when Westbrook looked up and he saw me and he called me over. He had this wallet in his hand. Now, I don't know where he found it, but he had the wallet in his hand. The wallet was there. There's no getting around that. Westbrook asked me, 'Do you know who Lee Harvey Oswald is? And do you know who Alec Heidel is?' And I said, 'No, I've never heard of them.' Westbrook then showed Barrett the wallet, the contents. Barrett said, quote, 'I'm adamant that there was a wallet.'" Now, it's interesting. Barrett is having to say this later, though he did not report examining or handling any such wallet in his official report. And of course, when pressed about it later, Dallas police say it never existed. Now, that wasn't the plan. The plan was to plant that on the doppelganger at the time of, plant that on somebody at the time of arrest. But when they get to Oswald and they arrest him, he's already got a wallet. Nobody carries two wallets. So all of a sudden, the second wallet becomes a problem. So Dallas police makes it disappear. But Bob Barrett said it was there, and we have picture proves that they were looking at a wallet. And this is extremely important because those two IDs link, first of all, the two men together, Oswald and Heidel. If the two IDs are in the same wallet, it links them together. And then they're going to produce in the subsequent days receipts from Ruth Payne's garage that prove that a man named Alec Heidel had ordered a 38 in a Mannlicher Carcano. And so it's going to link, and they already know that Alec Heidel is the alias for Lee Harvey Oswald. So once you link those two men together, then it links to those receipts, which links to the guns, which answers the question, because the 38 allegedly killed Tippit and the Mannlicher allegedly killed the president. So that whoever has these IDs on him They're his guns, and those guns killed the president and killed the police officer. So it's like an open shut case. It's an extremely important piece of evidence linking Oswald to Heidel and both of them to the guns that killed Tippit and Kennedy. The only problem is they can't use it later because when Oswald is arrested, he has his own wallet. And the obvious question is, where'd the second wallet come from? Unless Oswald wasn't supposed to be arrested. We already know Westbrook had in his possession Oswald's dark colored jacket. If he was trying to frame Oswald, he would have planted the dark colored jacket. He didn't. He planted the light colored jacket. We're going to learn that Oswald already has a wallet. You can't plant a second wallet and attribute it to a guy who has a wallet and gets arrested with the wallet in his possession. But we know, and we're going to find out, that the doppelganger doesn't have a wallet. You can plant that second wallet on the doppelganger because he doesn't have a wallet. He gave it to West. It's his wallet that Westbrook's showing everybody. And the 38, this is, again, why I believe that the 38, the wallet, and the jacket were handed over by the doppelganger to Westbrook at that Abundant Life Church parking lot, because that 38 is going to reappear. And of course, that's the murder weapon. And whoever is in possession of that murder weapon, we know killed Tippit. So you see what's happening here. So 135, Johnny Brewer says, we got to go down. We got to get Julia Postal to call the police based on the word of Tommy Rowe, based on the word of Jack Ruby. So at 144, the word goes out through radio dispatch that the suspect, the Tippit slang, has been spotted entering the Texas Theater. Captain Westbrook, who is the highest ranking police officer at the Tippit scene, orders immediately all 26 officers to leave the Tippit scene and go to the Texas Theater. And he himself leads the way in his blue unmarked car, drives it right up in front, up on the sidewalk, right in front of the entrance there to the theater. There's going to be a big show as they arrest the suspect, bring him out, put him in Westbrook's car. And there's even a photographer, that same photographer who took the picture of the bus back at Marsalis in Dallas 10 minutes after the assassination, took a picture of the front view of the bus, the back view, then went over and took a picture of the Texas School Book Depository 6th floor window. Now it's the same photographer. He's ready and waiting. He's in place to take the photo, make everybody famous coming out the front of that Texas theater. Everything's in place, right? They think. All right, I'm going to go back and answer those questions that we posited at the beginning. So if you'll be with me, if you'll be patient here, get back to it. It takes me a minute to scroll through all my slides. We covered quite a bit today. All right, here we are. So regarding Tippit, why did he stop his car? He stopped his car because the doppelganger was approaching and they had a conversation through the passenger window. In other words, he knew the doppelganger and they were talking. I don't know what they were talking about. I don't know what the setup was, but he stopped his car because I think there are two reasons. First of all, I think he knew where Westbrook and Croy were going to end up, right in front of that alley. And he parked his car right. It's kind of an odd place to park. And then the doppelganger happens by at the same time. Why did Dallas police change the time Tippit was shot from 1:06 to 1:15? Because after they arrest Oswald and they're retracing his steps in this timeline, they realize Oh, we got witnesses that say he was at his house at 103. We got witnesses that say the shooting happened at 106. That's a mile distance. Nobody can do that on foot. So we've got to change it. And so they conflated the time of death, the official time of death, with the time of the shooting. And 106 became 115, giving him 12 minutes to get to that location. Why did Westbrook leave the Tippit scene to drive to Abundant? It was a prearranged meetup with the doppelganger. Why did Westbrook leave Oak Cliff to drive back to the Texas? To switch out his car. Why did Croy stay at the Tippit scene? To control the crime scene. And uh, but he had to be smart about the way he did it, which is why he wore that Oswald's dark colored jacket at first, disguising himself. How and why did Croy attempt to disguise himself? Jacket. Why did Westbrook initially avoid the Tippit scene after returning? He didn't go right back to the Tippit scene. He went to the Texaco station so he could plant that jacket. Then he went back to the Tippit scene. What was the origin of the Oswald jacket that Westbrook? That was the light colored jacket. That was from the doppelganger at the Abundant Life Church where he got it. What was the purpose of the wallet Westbrook produced? That was to tie the uh, the identities of Oswald and doppelganger to get Alec Heidel, the alias, together, because Heidel is going to be the name on the receipts for the 38 for the Mannlicher that they're going to produce later. So that will tie Heidel to Oswald, ties both to the guns. And of course, they already know that the guns are the ones that killed JFK, or they're going to say killed JFK and killed Tippit. And so if the wallet with the two IDs works, you've just instantly tied the two names, identities together, which ties the assailant at the Tippit scene to the assailant of JFK and to both guns, and it basically wraps up the case as far as identities is concerned. So and of course it gives them a name to broadcast in a all points bulletin over the radio saying here's who we're looking for and here's his alias as well. How did 26 Dallas police officers end up from the Tippit scene to Texas Theater within one? Because A, they were close, but B, Westbrook gave the order. And Westbrook knew what the end game was. The arrest was going to happen at the theater. Next question. Where was his dark jacket when he entered the Texas Theater? The one Earlene Roberts said he was wearing? It was with Westbrook and Croy. How did he pay for a movie ticket and popcorn without his wallet? They're alleging later that this wallet that was found at the Tippit scene was Oswald's wallet, that he left it behind. Well, if that's the case, how did he pay for his movie ticket? The answer is he didn't drop his wallet. He always had it with him. It wasn't his wallet that they produced or manufactured or planted. Why did he move from seat to seat inside the theater? I will get more into that later. I just want to show you that he did move from seat to seat, which is very suspicious, odd behavior. I'll answer the why on that later. How did he attract the right kind of attention? Talk about the doppelganger. Well, I mean, he's the route he's taking, his suspicious lurking along, dumping the evidence as he's leaving the scene, getting rid of the shell casings, putting a gun in his wrist, his waistband. Warren Reynolds saw him do that. He's walking fast, walking erratically. He's just everywhere he goes, he's collecting witnesses. It started way back in 10th Street from the Marsalis side of town. He's walking along, he's collecting witnesses all on the way. Then he shoots a cop. And in a way, he leaves that scene. The circuitous route he ends up at Abundant Life Church attracts all kinds of attention. And that's the right kind of attention because remember, his job is to lay the bait. He's the breadcrumb guy. How did Oswald get from his rooming house to 10th and Patton on foot? He did. It's impossible. Why did Tippit and his passenger drive to 10th and Patton location, joining Westbrook and Croy? He was going to get instructions what to do next because he had failed at his original assignment and he knew where Westbrook was going to be. And he knew that because it was right next to the house where he lived with his girlfriend. Why did Dallas police claim the shooter left his wallet on the ground at the Tippit scene? Well, we've already answered that. It was incriminating in about 3 different ways. How did Oswald get from 10th and Patton to the Texas Theater, which is on Mile, on foot? And one he did. He was never at that scene. He never went to the scene. He never was at the scene. He was never there. If Oswald was the man Butch Burroughs witnessed entering the Texas Theater between 1 and 107, buying a ticket at 107, who was the Oswald witnesses said shot Officer Tippit at 106? Just doppelganger. And almost an exact replica, right? Nearly identical. If Oswald was the man Butch Burroughs was selling popcorn to the theater at 115, who was the Oswald Dallas police said shot Officer Tippit at 115? First of all, nobody shot Tippit at 115. Tippit was shot at 106. All right. 115 is the conflation to try to make the time work so the suspect could be Lee Harvey Oswald. If Lee Harvey Oswald entered the theater between 1 and 107, according to Burroughs and various moviegoers, who was the Oswald that entered at 135, according to Tommy Rowe, Johnny Brewer, Julia Postal, and of course Jack Ruby? And that was the doppelganger. Interestingly, now Jack Ruby, who's feeding all this, is sitting downstairs. So he's observing the guy in the brown shirt. The doppelganger never went downstairs. He went upstairs. He never saw him. He's just reporting to Tommy Rowe what he is seeing in front of him. And so last question, why did Julia Postal burst into tears twice? And she's obviously she realized she'd made a mistake. It's too late to go back now. She's in it now. Regarding the evidence, why did witnesses not see spent .38 shells and or the wallet on the ground near Tippit's body? Well, because the doppelganger manually ejected the .38 shells as he fled the scene, not at the body. And as far as the wallet is concerned, that was the doppelganger's wallet that he hand-delivered to Westbrook at the Abundant Life Church that Westbrook later brought over and said that he found. So, of course, they didn't see it on the ground. It wasn't ever on the ground. Why did the .38 shells in the Warren Commission exhibit not have J.M. Poe's initials on it? Because they're not the same ones, clearly. Benavides reported hearing 5 shots. Why were there only 4 shell casings recovered? Because there were 2 shooters, and one did not manually eject. Okay, I'm almost done. Why did the distribution of Winchester and Remington bullets taken from Tippit's body not match the distribution of spent shell casings from the .38 revolver taken off Oswald at the theater? Because it was 2 guns, not one. And they tried to conflate it into one, and you end up with 3 bullets that were either Remington or Winchester, and one was the opposite in Tippit's body, and 2 and 2 in his. And that came from 2 guns. If it was 1 gun, that's not possible. If it's 2 guns, it is. But they have to maintain that it was 1 gun. Why did witnesses say 2 men fled Tippit's scene? Because 2 men did the shooting, and then they fled in opposite directions, which is what the witnesses saw. Why did Westbrook leave the scene of a crime? He was leaving to go meet the doppelganger to get the incriminating evidence, and then he was leaving to go to the Texas School Depository to switch his car. Why did DPD change the time of Tippit's shooting? Okay, obvious, to make the timeline fix. Why did they plant a wallet only to make it disappear later? Because when they arrested Oswald, he had a wallet. It had to disappear. Why was Stuart Reed in position to take all these photographs? They were documenting. And as far as the Marsalis bus was concerned, they were going to show that Oswald was supposed to be on that Marsalis bus. But later, if they're going to use the doppelganger as the patsy, they're not going to take a picture of the Nash Rambler. They're going to use the same bus to show that that's how he got to that 10th Street location on the Marsalis side of town as he began his journey to the Texas Theater. So they're going to take a photograph of the bus that allegedly got both men to the location where they start their journey to the theater. And then, of course, the sixth floor window, they're going to say that's where the shots came from. The Texas Theater is going to be the arrest place. So they've got it all set up in advance for it to be photographed by Stuart Reed. Why did they relieve Oswald of his dark colored jacket? This is because this is evidence that everyone has seen him out and about in this jacket. And if they want him to be recognized later, then they'll leave him in this jacket. But if they want him not to be recognized later because he's not wearing a jacket, they take it from him. This is a big clue as to what their real intentions with Oswald were. It wasn't to have him be dressed the same as he was in the morning. They wanted him appearing slightly different in the afternoon so that he could make his escape, which was to the Redbird Airfield. It wasn't his jacket that they planted. It was the doppelganger's jacket that they planted. Next question. Why did the officers take the Oswald doppelganger's light colored jacket wallet? Because that's the evidence they're going to plant. They're going to plant the jacket. They're going to attempt to plant the wallet, and they are going to try to plant the 38. They will succeed in planting the 38. It's interesting. It's not Lee Harvey Oswald's evidence that they plant. It's the doppelganger's evidence that gets planted all along the way. How did the first mix-up lead to this? The first mix-up was Tippit was supposed to get him off the Marcellus bus and take him to the theater. When that didn't happen, Tippit starts running around and he ends up at 10th Street and he ends up shot. That's the second mix-up. That was not supposed to happen. How would the acknowledgement of a second Oswald before, during, and after the assassination have changed the investigation? It changes everything. Everything. Because now you realize there's a cutout, and the cutout is being used to incriminate the asset. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the asset is the target. It just means that there's a setup that's being engineered before, during, and after for a specific reason, for a specific purpose, towards a specific target. And if we had known that, if the Warren Commission had investigated it from that perspective, it completely changes everything about the case. I mean, if for no other reason, it indicates intelligence, the hand of intelligence. The mafia doesn't do stuff like that. So, all right. That's enough for today. We went on quite a bit. I'm out of time. I've got somebody knocking at the door who wants to get in. So until next time, God bless. Thank you.